My name is Edward Barnes. I'm 69 years old, a retired Navy engineer from Charleston, South Carolina, a man who has spent his whole life taking orders, giving orders, fixing what's broken, and learning that sometimes the hardest thing to repair is your own family. And the day I realized my son no longer wanted me in his future was the day something inside me cracked, not in anger, but in a deep, quiet kind of grief that only a father who has given everything can understand, because I raised my boy Daniel with the belief that loyalty was our family's backbone, that respect wasn't optional, and that no matter how far life pushed us, blood always pulled us back. But life has a way of teaching you that sometimes the people you loved most can drift so far that they no longer look back. I wasn't a perfect father, but I was present. I worked overtime so Daniel could attend a good school. I fixed his science fair projects. I coached his baseball team. I taught him how to drive. And I was the one sitting in the front row when he graduated with his engineering degree. When his mother passed away 8 years ago, I thought tragedy might pull us even closer, but instead the distance began slow at first, then growing like a crack in a ship's hull until water comes rushing in. At every family dinner afterward, he seemed to drift emotionally, comparing my old-fashioned ways to the modern world he was chasing. He married a woman named Brooke, smart and ambitious, but she looked at me like I was a relic, someone to tolerate, not to value. She encouraged the distance. She made comments about how the older generation needs to step aside, how we can't carry the past forever, how your dad needs to simplify his life. Daniel repeated her tone without noticing he was echoing her, not himself. The breaking point came when he invited me to his new home, a sleek, modern townhouse he bought without telling me, something that surprised me because he used to share every big milestone with me. When I walked in, I felt out of place instantly. Everything was white, glass, metal. No warmth, no family photos except their wedding picture in the center of the living room like a shrine. They sat me down, and Brooke, with that carefully polite voice, said, "Edward, we think it's time you start planning for long-term care. Independence gets harder with age." Daniel nodded, hesitant but silent. I was stunned. I still mow my own lawn. I fix my own appliances. I'm healthier than many men 20 years younger. "I'm not going into any facility," I said quietly. "I'm not asking you to take care of me. I've always handled my own life." Brooke exchanged a glance with Daniel, then said something that sliced right through me. "We just need to think of our future too. We'll have kids soon. We don't want any burdens." Burden. A word I never expected to hear from my own family, but the real blow hadn't landed yet. Brooke got up and brought out a folder, sliding it toward me like a lawyer delivering a verdict. "These are forms," she said, "so Daniel can legally manage your estate and medical decisions when the time comes. It will be easier for everyone." I opened the folder and saw not future planning, but a disguised attempt to take early control of my assets, including my home. Daniel had already signed his part. He looked ashamed, but not enough to stop. In that moment, I realized I wasn't part of his future. I was part of his calculations. I closed the folder slowly and stood up. "I see," I said. "Well, thank you both. You've made things very clear." Brooke smiled faintly, thinking I was agreeing. Daniel didn't look at me. I drove home in silence that night, the road blurry through tears I didn't want to admit were there. I sat in my living room staring at the photos of our old family trips, birthdays, holidays, the life I thought we shared. And then, like calm that comes after a storm, I made a decision. If my son was cutting me out of his future, then I would cut him out of mine, but first, I would leave him a goodbye gift he'd never forget. Over the next several weeks, I took steps quietly. First, I called my attorney, a man named Jordan who had known me for 30 years. We met in his office, and I explained everything. From the forms they tried to make me sign to the conversations where Brooke hinted I should move into assisted living soon. Jordan wasn't surprised. He said more adult children do this than most people realize. But his next question was simple. "What do you want to do about it?" I told him I wasn't interested in revenge. I wanted justice. I wanted peace. And I wanted my legacy, my life's work, to go to people who actually valued me. So we rewrote everything. My will, my property, documents, my investments, the Navy pension I earned with 20 years of service. But I didn't leave Daniel nothing. No, that would have been too simple. People forget when you teach them a lesson gently, they listen harder. While revising the documents, I also made arrangements for a surprise one he would only learn about after I was gone. The next step was preparing my house. I organized documents, scanned old photos, made labeled folders for memories, and wrote letters for the people who mattered. Then I packed a suitcase not because I was running away, but because I had made arrangements to move to a quiet senior community by the water, a place where I could breathe without feeling like I was taking up space in someone else's life. But before leaving, I planned one final visit to Daniel's home. When I arrived, Brooke opened the door with her usual bored expression. Daniel looked confused. I told them I had come to talk. We sat at their cold, modern dining table, and I placed the folder, the same one they had given me, back in front of them. I didn't sign your documents, I said, but I brought something else. I took out a single sheet of paper, not legal forms, not accusations, just a statement declaring that they were no longer responsible for me in any capacity financially, medically, or emotionally. You don't have to worry about me being a burden, I said. I'm removing myself from your life so your future stays uncomplicated. That's what you wanted, right? Brooke straightened up, trying to mask her surprise. Daniel's face drained of color. Dad, that's exactly what it is, I said gently, and I accept it. He opened his mouth again, but for once Brooke stayed silent. I stood, shook Daniel's hand not out of warmth but closure, and walked toward the door. Before leaving, I turned and said, "You cut me out of your future, son. I'm only giving you what you asked for." Then I left without looking back. For the first time in years, I felt free. A week later, I moved into my new place, a coastal apartment with friendly neighbors, weekly chess games, a little garden patch, and peace I hadn't felt since my wife was alive. I made new friends. I volunteered at a veteran center. I built a life that didn't rotate around being needed or unwanted. Months passed quietly until my lawyer called. "He found out," Jordan said with a faint laugh. He came into the office demanding answers. I smiled. "And did he get any?" "Only the letter you left for him," Jordan replied. "The letter, my final gift? Inside it, Daniel found a message telling him that I loved him. But love does not mean surrendering your dignity. That he would inherit something someday, but not money, not property, not assets. Instead, he would receive a journal I spent months writing, a record of my life, my memories, our family history, the sacrifices he never knew, and the lessons I hoped he'd understand one day. That was my gift. Not wealth he expected, wisdom he needed." And at the end of the letter, I wrote, "If someday you want to rebuild our relationship, remember the door is open. But respect must walk through it first." Jordan told me Daniel cried when he read it. Maybe it meant something. Maybe it didn't. Maybe one day he'll come find me. Maybe he won't, but I'm no longer waiting on a future someone else controls. I built my own. Because sometimes the greatest goodbye gift you can give isn't revenge. It's clarity.